Morning, everyone. This week is really a week in contrast, where we're going to be able to lay out for the American people what we're about and what House Republicans are all about. We want to bring the country together. The other side continues to try to tear us apart. We want to move the country forward. There are folks on the other side who want to turn back the clock. We're fighting for the people. They're fighting for the privileged few. We wake up each and every day. We fight for working families, middle-class folks, and senior citizens. As their budget shows, they fight for the wealthy, the well-off, and the well-connected. We believe in the public interest. They're all about the special interests. This week, House Democrats will introduce the DREAM Act, supported by a considerable number of Americans on both sides of the ideological divide, to make sure that we give these young people the opportunity to continue to make America the best that it can be. We will also introduce the Equality Act to make sure that no American, regardless of sexual orientation, is discriminated against. That's a value that's consistent with the United States Constitution. We believe in liberty and justice for all. We believe in equal protection under the law. We passed H.R. 1 because we believe in government of the people, by the people, and for the people. The House Democratic majority continues to fight for everyday Americans, day after day, week after week, month after month. This week, President Donald Trump and the Republicans have shown us once more what they are all about. They introduced his budget that would cut approximately $2 trillion from Medicare and Medicaid. It would cut over $200 billion from programs designed to make sure that young people can pursue their dreams of a college education. The president's budget cuts funding for the Department of Transportation, despite the fact that our bridges, roads, tunnels, airports, mass transportation system are crumbling and falling apart. The president's budget cuts billions of dollars from the Department of Housing and Urban Development, despite the fact that middle-class Americans and folks who aspire to be part of the middle class all across the country are struggling to find affordable housing, to pursue their dream of home ownership, which is quintessential to what being an American is all about. So over the last few weeks, we've shown the American people what we stand for, and this week, the Republicans once again have shown the American people what they stand for, a budget that extends the GOP tax scam, where 83% of the benefits went to the wealthiest 1%, simply to subsidize the lifestyles of the rich and shameless. That's what they're all about. And we'll continue to move our For the People agenda on behalf of everyday Americans, consistent with what we promised the American people we would do in the House majority. Let me now yield to our distinguished Vice Chair from the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, Chairwoman Catherine Clark.
Thank you, Hakeem, and good morning, everyone. We have a budget that came out this week from the Trump administration, and budgets are far more than line items funded at different levels. They are a set of values, and they are a blueprint for the American dream. And this administration has shown us once again where those values lie. It is with billionaires over working families. It is with corporations over children. And despite this president's assurances to the American people that he would not cut Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security. He has proposed over $2 trillion in cuts to those very programs. And then he looks at our children, proposes cuts to Head Start, to the SNAP program that feeds hungry children and families. He proposes dramatic cuts to TANF, that is support for our lowest income families. He has said that he is going to cut student aid and help our students make their way forward and build prosperity. All of the values are here for us to see. They contradict exactly what candidate Trump said he would do if we made him president of the United States. And we are beginning our appropriations process to push back and to set out a budget and appropriate funding that will help build real Americans, that will help working families succeed. What we have seen today is an abomination. It is showing that this administration is disconnected from what American families face, what they talk about, the economic realities when they sit around their kitchen tables. And this caucus is united in our determination that we will push back and continue our work that we've seen with H.R. 1, that we've seen with addressing gun violence, that we're seeing this week with rolling out the DREAM Act and rolling out the Equality Act to put the interests of American families back on the front burner here in Congress.
Thank you, Catherine. Any questions? Casey.
Mr. Jeffries, Nancy Pelosi said that impeaching the president isn't worth it. Do you agree?
I agree that we have to proceed with caution, and that is the position of the overwhelming majority of the members of the House Democratic Caucus.
But we have heard there is a divide within your caucus. We have heard from many of your members that are not in support of this. This is the second time in 2 weeks that we've been talking about Democratic divide. Are you worried about that?
There are 239 members of the House Democratic Caucus. I assume you've heard from a small handful who perhaps have indicated they would like to proceed with impeachment. Nancy Pelosi, our Speaker, set forth a clear standard that makes sense in terms of how we should move forward. She has indicated that the case should be compelling, that the evidence must be overwhelming, and that the public sentiment with respect to impeachment should be bipartisan in nature. That sounds to me like a very reasonable standard in terms of how we should proceed with the most solemn of our constitutional responsibilities.
I talked to two members today who are going to move forward with their articles of impeachment. One of them, Al Green, says he's going to force another vote. Is that unhelpful that he's going to force a vote under Speaker Pelosi? And he's afraid that leadership might change the rules and block him from doing that. Have there been discussions about that?
There's been no discussion about that. Every member is free to introduce a privileged resolution as they see fit, consistent with the district that they represent. But we are going to proceed with a focus on our For the People agenda, as we have been doing. We promised the American people that we would fight to lower health care costs, leading with trying to reduce the high cost of prescription drugs. That's what we are planning to do. We promised the American people that we would fight to increase pay for everyday Americans, leading with a real and robust bipartisan infrastructure plan. That's what we plan to do. We promised the American people that we would clean up corruption and bring our democracy to life. We introduced H.R. 1, we passed H.R. 1, and we're going to break up the special interest racket that exists here in Washington, D.C. We didn't run on impeachment. We did not win on impeachment. We are not governing with a focus on impeachment. Want to say anything?
Sure.
Okay.
On the topic of impeachment, I think we have to be clear that that is not the end goal of this caucus. what our goal is and our focus is using our responsibility and our authority to hold this administration accountable. And there is very little light between the members of this caucus on how dangerous this president is and how we need to have the facts established. So I think that we are in a good position. We have our committees up and operating. They are conducting their investigations responsibly and fairly, and we should not be drawing a conclusion before we have those facts before us.
Has leadership told the members of Congress who are planning on introducing resolutions that before all the facts are on the table, that it's not necessarily helpful to the cause?
Not to my knowledge. Speaker Pelosi made a public statement. It apparently has attracted a lot of attention. It certainly appears to me that the membership understands her position. She has consistently articulated that position. Chairman Jerry Nadler shares that position. Catherine Clark, myself, we share that position, and that is how we're proceeding right now. Cheryl, and then we'll go right there.
A small number of people. Earlier today, Steny Hoyer said there are 62 new members of the Democratic caucus, not 3. Are you concerned that these loud voices on the left, some of your new freshmen like Rashida Tlaib and others, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, are projecting an image of the party that you don't want to project to the American people?
No,
Are they hijacking the conversation in any way?
no.
And do you think that Speaker Pelosi's statement was, in essence, an effort to kind of take control of the narrative?
Seems to me that Speaker Pelosi's statement was an indication of a clearly delineated standard for how we should proceed, with a focus on our For the People agenda designed to make life better for everyday Americans, while at the same time recognizing that we do have a constitutional responsibility as an Article I separate and co-equal branch of government to do meaningful oversight. We will not over-politicize that oversight. We will not overreach with respect to that oversight, but we will continue to systematically work through these very important issues with respect to holding the Trump administration accountable, but at the same time maintaining our focus on the issues that are important to the American people.
Can
Catherine.
I'd just like to add that I do think the freshmen have changed everything. When we had Congressman Green's resolution come before us, we were in the minority. Those freshmen have delivered us the majority. We are now able to have the investigations that Republicans refuse to look at, refuse to take up, and to do our job as, laid out in Article I. So yes, I think they have changed everything and have given us the tools that we need to be able to hold this administration accountable.
Oh, sorry. Do you have any thoughts on why the speaker made the statement when she did? It sort of came out of the blue, but it came in the context of everything that happened last week. Why would she say this and why now?
I don't have any sense of why she made that statement. It appears that that interview may have actually taken place a week before it was published, but beyond that, it's hard for me to comment on the timing. I'm sorry, you have a follow-up?
Yeah, just to follow up. I mean, is the practical effect of this is now you have more space to talk about the Trump budget, to talk about prescription drug prices, so on and so forth, and not have to answer question after question on impeachment?
Well, we're going to proceed with a focus on our For the People agenda, and I think it's healthy for everybody to take a step back and to put in context the first 60-plus days or so of the House Democratic majority. If you would have read the reviews over the last week, you would think that we are mired in chaos, crisis, and confusion. No, that's the Trump administration for the last 2 years. We are unified in terms of how we are proceeding with respect to the agenda for the American people. We ended Donald Trump's reckless 35-day government shutdown. We reopened the government with Donald Trump engaging in an unconditional surrender. We negotiated a robust bipartisan package on border security. Over the objection of Donald Trump, we increased pay for federal employees by 1.9%. We overwhelmingly passed a resolution of disapproval with respect to Donald Trump's fake national emergency. For the first time in decades, we moved bipartisan legislation to address our gun violence epidemic with passage of universal criminal background checks. We didn't stop there. We also closed the Charleston loophole. We didn't stop there. Last week, we moved the most significant electoral reform package perhaps to ever make its way through the House of Representatives with respect to H.R. 1. We're not stopping there. This week, we introduced the DREAM Act. This week, we introduced the Equality Act. Does that sound like chaos, crisis, and confusion? Next question.
So I actually want to ask about something different. That's cool. The first.
Feel free.
Actually, I have two unrelated questions, so if we can just both of them. The first one is about the Ethiopian airliner crash and the FAA stance that we need to keep the 737 MAX series in the air. So I'd like to know if, Congress has oversight over the FAA as a federal body. Do the Democrats plan, or do either of you plan to call for that plane to be grounded at this point, like many of our allies have done?
Well, this is another tragedy, and sort of we offer our hearts, prayers, and certainly our support to the Ethiopian authorities as they try to figure out what happened and appropriately bury and mourn the loss of all of those souls who have died prematurely. There appears to be something that needs a deeper investigation. I'm going to defer to the chairman of our Transportation and Infrastructure Committee, Peter DeFazio, with respect to how we as a House Democratic Caucus should move forward. I would also suspect that Chairman Elijah Cummings, who presides over the Oversight Committee, will also have some interesting things to say about how we should proceed.
And then my second question is about the budget. Yesterday at the White House, OMB Director Russ Vought said that the domestic spending cuts are intended to erase or to balance the budget and deplete the debt. So what is your response to that assertion that we need to make these cuts to balance our budget in the next 15 years?
Well, the Trump budget is like an atomic bomb that they plan to detonate on working families, middle-class folks, senior citizens, the poor, the sick, and the afflicted. Is shameful. Donald Trump and Republicans have zero credibility when it comes to the issue of fiscal responsibility. Exhibit A, the Republican tax scam, where they exploded the debt and the deficit by approximately $2 trillion to subsidize the lifestyles of the rich and shameless, millionaires, billionaires, and their friends and family. I'm sorry. Okay, go ahead. Yeah.
Two questions, if I may. One quick follow-up on impeachment. We were talking yesterday about bipartisanship being one of the standards. You said you'd elaborate today on what that means. So can you elaborate on what the standard you look for in bipartisanship for impeachment is? And then the second question is about the budget, so I'll let you answer that one.
Well, the Speaker has been clear that partisanship is necessary with respect to proceeding through our constitutional responsibilities of impeachment, which then lead to the possibility of removal. I think the Founding Fathers were very clear in setting a high bar in the Senate for the logical outgrowth of an impeachment proceeding, which is a removal trial. That bar was set at 2/3 of the Senate, which means that 67 members of that body would have to vote to remove the president if he is impeached. Clearly, based on the constitutional standard set forth by our founding fathers, impeachment and its logical successor, a removal trial, must be bipartisan in nature.
And then the budget question is, Congresswoman, you said today something that Pelosi says often, that budgets are a statement of our values. Yet
Yeah.
we're reading reports that House Democrats might not pass a budget this year. If you guys decide, have you made a decision about that? And if you guys have not, do you feel like not doing so represents a failure to make that statement about Democrats' values?
Well, we certainly are planning on passing a budget and making sure that we have our appropriation bills out in a timely way. That has been our commitment coming from the Appropriations Committee. And I think it is telling that this budget, once again, doubles down on the tax scam that the Republicans and this president inflicted on the American people. As we see our deficit and debt rise, we continue to see investments in defense, but those programs that support working families, that support low-income families, our veterans, our seniors, our students, those are all on the chopping block. And we want the American people to understand the statement that is made in this budget about how the administration views them and where their priorities are. And they are clearly with people in this country who have already obtained the greatest wealth and with corporations.
2 more questions.
On climate change, that policy area has obviously been a front burner for Democrats so far, particularly with regards to committee activity. How do you see that activity evolving? When will Democrats start devising solutions? And also the select committee is kickstarting later this month. Do you see kind of a unique role, or how do you see that select committee kind of playing a role in the broader picture?
Well, climate change is an urgent issue that we must address, given that the stakes are incredibly high. Speaker Pelosi has designated a select committee on climate change, which is going to be the initial vehicle to study this issue in a thoughtful way, take in recommendations and policy proposals, and then presumably at the end of that process, make recommendations to the Energy and Commerce Committee, perhaps to the Committee on Natural Resources, as well as to the broader House Democratic Caucus, and at that point we can decide how to proceed.
Are you sensing any, just quick follow, are you sensing any room for bipartisan action? Republicans like to talk about adaptation, kind of like to steer clear of emission reduction policies.
I certainly hope that there is room for bipartisan action. I represent a predominantly Democratic district, but also one with independents and Republicans, in a district that was overrun by Superstorm Sandy. When that extreme weather event struck, it didn't just strike Democratic houses, or didn't just strike Republican houses, it didn't just strike independent houses, it struck everyone. And that is the case all across the United States of America with respect to extreme weather events. And so we want to pursue doing something meaningful on climate change in a bipartisan way.
I think that the Select Committee is going to give us an opportunity to make the case that whatever we do in this budget, whatever we want to pursue to strengthen our economy, has to be done in conjunction with addressing climate change. It's not only the natural disasters. I just was in Alabama on a pilgrimage to Selma, and as we were leaving, tornadoes were striking. These sort of natural disasters that we're seeing in more and more frequency, the ability of our farmers to continue to grow crops. We will not have an economy if we don't address the urgent needs of climate change. So we certainly hope that there will be ample opportunity to reach out across the aisle and have Republicans join us. But we are seeing, once again, in a lot of the regulatory action that this administration is taking, that they are undermining how we have already begun in other administrations to address climate change. And we're hoping to bring that into focus and build support and understanding about what a crisis we have find ourselves in addressing climate change in this country, build that support with the American people and with our colleagues in the other party.
Just 2 questions on the budget. First being, if I could get your thoughts on the administration essentially saying there shouldn't be another deal to lift spending caps.
Well, we're in the process of having discussions as it relates to both the Senate and presumably the administration. They've articulated that position. It's not clear whether that's just an opening negotiating position or whether that is their view about how we should proceed. As Vice Chair Clark indicated, our House Appropriations Committee is going to continue to do its work to create a spending bill that does justice to our values as it relates to standing up for working families, middle-class folks, those who aspire to be part of the middle class, our seniors, the poor, the sick, the afflicted, veterans, and people all across the United States of America. And regardless of the administration position, Article 1 of the United States Constitution, through the origination clause, makes clear that spending bills initiate in the United States House of Representatives.
And I would just like to say to the administration, let's put your cards on the table. If we want to talk about enforcing spending caps, then let's look at defense and sort of the sleight of hand move they are trying to accomplish there by saying we're not raising spending caps. All of the cuts, the spending caps, under this administration fall squarely on American families. That is not fair and it is not honest. And we will be highlighting that and pushing back on that.
On the defense note, will Democrats be insisting on a dollar-for-dollar increase for defense and non-defense spending?
Yes, we will.
Last question, Heather.
I wanted to get back to the impeachment a little bit, and the narrative you guys have struggled to. You listed off all the things you guys have been doing on the floor and stuff like that, but obviously, what's reported is a lot different. I'm wondering what you think how Trump has changed Washington and how much he is to contribute for the way things have been going. Like, you guys, this is the first time you've been in the majority under President Trump, and he kind of brought a whole new way of doing things to DC. Like, how much responsibility does he take for the day-to-day narrative and crisis-to-crisis kind of conversation?
Well, there's a clear objective on behalf of the president to try to drive the narrative forward. But Donald Trump is like the Wizard of Oz. He creates all this imagery, this chaos, this crisis, this confusion, projects magical powers. But at the end of the day, it's the majority here in the House of Representatives that is driving forward an agenda on behalf of everyday Americans. Thank you, everyone.